The movie begins with the introduction of Haruka Nozaki, the central character. Her day begins at school as she opens her locker, only to discover a layer of dirt and dust inside. She is approached by Mitsuru Eba, a handsome and intelligent classmate, who inquires whether she is waiting for someone. Nozaki responds affirmatively, and Eba bids her goodbye as they part ways. As he leaves, Nozaki also sets off to her house, but it seems that she lied to Eba about someone waiting for her since she is walking back alone. On her way back, a distressing incident unfolds. Nozaki becomes the target of bullying by her classmates. They have taken her shoes from the locker and callously thrown them into a pit filled with mud, taunting her. Despite the mockery, Nozaki ventures into the pit to retrieve her shoes. However, she slips and faceplants into the dirty pit, ending up covered in mud while managing to get back her footwear. The situation escalates when, in the meantime, the girls take hold of her bag. They start throwing her belongings from her bag all over the place. Amidst the chaos, Takabana accuses Nozaki of hurting the feelings of another girl named Teiko. They accuse her of putting her ugly claws all over Eba, suggesting this is the reason for their actions. However, Teiko denies any involvement with Eba, asserting that it's not related to him. As the bullying continues, a group of boys, probably the girls' accomplices, arrive. They enjoy this sick hobby of theirs and soon go back home. Silently enduring the humiliation and without retaliating, poor Nozaki quietly gathers her scattered belongings and heads back home. As Nozaki arrives home, her sister Shouko, who is a year younger, immediately notices her miserable condition and bursts into tears. Shouko's genuine concern for her sister's well-being is evident as she rushes over to Nozaki and wraps her arms around her, showering her with affection. Their parents, witnessing the distressing scene, quickly join in the embrace, forming a tight family hug to comfort Nozaki. The following day, Nozaki's father takes a stand against the bullying at her school, expressing his concerns to teacher Minami, the school staff member. However, rather than addressing the issue, Miss Minami appears to brush off the complaint. Instead, she suggests that Mr. Nozaki should also turn a blind eye to the issue. She brazenly tells the poor hurting father that the school is going to shut down this year anyway, so he should not stir up problems. It seems this woman does not understand who the actual problem creators are. Anyway, it turns out this school only has a few students and all of them have been together since childhood, except Nozaki. Moreover, they are all going to graduate within 2 months. As Nozaki returns to her classroom, she finds the same 3 bullies messing up her desk and throwing sawdust at her face. On the other side, as Nozaki's father is leaving the meeting with Miss Minami, he gets kicked by Nozaki's classmate Kuga. The impact causes him to go tumbling down the stairs. The poor man groans in pain while the students laugh and run away, saying that he deserved it. Back inside the classroom, as Miss Minami is teaching a lesson, blood begins dripping onto Nozaki's chair from a lifeless crow deliberately placed inside her desk drawer. Kuga, laughing with delight, tries to alert Miss Minami about the crow, but he is ignored. Minami looks tense as she writes away on the board, without so much as a backward glance. Tensions escalate and Eba stands up, taking Nozaki's side. He calls out to Teiko asking her to stop all this nonsense, but Kuga comes forth saying that it was his doing. The boys engage in an argument, standing face to face. Meanwhile, Teiko writes something on a piece of paper and tosses it forward. The paper travels amidst the class, resulting in laughs as it finally reaches the front row, accidentally hitting Miss Minami. Startled, Miss Minami panics and rushes out, leaving the room. Outside, she becomes strangely ill, throws up all over the wall and falls down, while the students inside make fun of her reaction. As evening falls, Nozaki returns home and is taken aback to find her father injured. Concerned, she inquires and finds out that he was kicked at school. Her parents advise her not to attend school if she feels scared. Since she is already graduating in 2 months, it is better to stay safely at home. Her father explains that they moved because of his job and reassures Nozaki that it's his responsibility to protect their family. The next morning, Nozaki wakes up with a fever, and her mother advises her to rest and skip school. As she leaves the room, her sister arrives and asks about her health. When she sees that her sister is feeling better, she lightens up the mood by joyfully dancing and jumping around the room. Then, the scene shifts back to the school, where the girls are talking about Nozaki's situation. They are sad since Nozaki has not been coming to school for the last 3 days, probably missing their bullying target. They decide to ensure she's not forgetting about them and threaten a classmate named Rumi to go check on her. They tell her to make sure that she comes back to school. The poor girl is even threatened that she'll be the next target if she fails to accomplish this task. Rumi visits Nozaki's home and discovers her lying in bed. She sits by her side, asking if everything is okay, but from her expressions, it is quite clear that she couldn't care less. When Nozaki expresses her decision not to return to school until graduation, Rumi erupts, shouting that if she doesn't come, they will target and torment Rumi instead. Rumi takes one of her music CDs as proof of her visit as an attempt to persuade Nozaki to return to school. The following day, while Nozaki is absent from school, Rumi is confined inside a cupboard in the classroom, enduring mistreatment from the girls. They keep hitting the cupboard with sticks and keep chastising the girl for her failed attempt. Teiko sits beside the cupboard looking rather bored. The girls pass on the CD to her, not knowing what to do with the object that Rumi confiscated from Nozaki. Meanwhile, Nozaki and her sister enjoy a cheerful walk along a forest path. There, they encounter Eba, who is busy taking pictures of a plant named Liverleaf. When Shouko approaches him and asks, He replies gently that this plant blossoms after enduring the harsh winter and that soon enough this forest will be full of these beautiful plants that represent hope. But three take a stroll, and it turns out Aba also changes schools and came here like Mizaki. He currently lives with his grandmother. As they take a few steps, Shaoko pesters him to take a picture of her with her sister. He smiles and agrees. As he takes pictures of them, he expresses his happiness, noting that it's his first time capturing human subject. Back at school, Rumi faces including having her hair cut randomly by Teiko. One of the bullies asks Rumi if she despises Nizaki, and Rumi responds by expressing a desire to eliminate her completely. The next day, Shaoko shares and admires the picture taken by Aba with their mother. She is happily smiling and wants to go out with Nizaki again, but her mother stops her and smiles at Nizaki to go on ahead. Outside her house, Aba waits for her. Before they depart together, Shaoko comes running out and gives a necklace that she made in school to her sister. It is a white pendant with a green clover. Nizaki smiles at her sister and happily accepts the gift. She then bids farewell and sets off with Aba. Together, they spend the day by the riverside, capturing moments and enjoying each other's company. During their time together, Aba talks about the city's beauty after snowfall. His hand accidentally touches Nizaki's and he apologizes. But then, moments later, he deliberately puts his hand over hers, to which she responds with a smile. Day turns into night and they return home side by side. As they are walking back, they notice the bullies hurriedly walking past them and casting glances toward Nizaki's house. Nizaki sees their scared faces and looks back to find her house caught on fire. Rushing there with Aba in tow, she finds a gathering crowd. Turns out her family is trapped inside and the house is covered in flames. Devastated, she attempts to enter the burning house, but Aba and another person standing near prevent her from doing so. Soon an ambulance arrives and seeing as everyone is distracted, Aba rushes to enter the house. Distraught and overwhelmed, she witnesses Aba enter the house and retrieve Shaoko. Her poor little sister is severely injured, but thankfully, she is still breathing. Emergency services are called, and her sister is immediately taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, her parents, who were still inside the house during the incident, couldn't be saved. In the next scene, we shift to the hospital where we see Nizaki's grandfather who has come to identify the corpses. After that, he pays Nizaki a visit. She waits outside the ICU where her sister is being cared for. Turns out, Nizaki's father held his poor little girl Shaoko till his last breath, so that she could be saved from the tragic fate. After her house burnt down to ashes, Nizaki shifted. Currently, she resides with her grandfather in his home. The next day, we see Teiko going off to school. Her mother hands her the lunchbox and talks about Nizaki's house that burnt down the other day. She mentions it was one of her classmates' houses and that she should go and pay her condolences. Teiko quietly agrees and departs. Back at school, the group of bullies harbors fears, worried that if the cause of the fire is discovered, they'll face severe consequences. Two of the bullies, particularly the ladies, are deeply frightened, unable to fathom that the fire could have taken those people's lives. On the other hand, some within the group show no remorse, seemingly unaffected by their actions that led to a family's devastation. Kuga says that he merely wanted to scare them a little, but the situation escalated and he couldn't stop it, so he just left them to their fate. He has a little burnt mark on his finger and the group fears that it might lead to them being found out. Just beside the group, Rumi stands with a strange lifeless and faraway look in her eyes. It is as if she no longer feels anything. As the group talks about how they made Nizaki's family go into ruin, she has little to no reaction. That day at school, Rumi goes near Teiko's desk and in a horrifyingly cheerful manner tells her how she missed out on an amazing show the other day. She is referring to Nizaki's burning house and calls it an amazing show. Teiko watches Rumi's hand on her table and with a swift motion plunges her pen into it. She sternly warns the girl to stay away and never dare to put her hands on her table. Scared, Rumi trembles and moves away with her bleeding hand. Afterwards, Rumi is summoned by their teacher Minami. The woman warns her to stay away from Teiko and keep to herself till graduation so that she may keep her happy memory. The school time ends and as Teiko is leaving, Kuga approaches her, asking to come over to his house as his parents would be out today. He says that he wants to dye his hair like her so she can help, but we all know that is not the case. Teiko ignores the guy and goes back home. Back at home, we see Teiko's father who calls her to come over. He tells her that he heard all about her plans of going to Tokyo for studies and how she wants to live independently. He flatly tells her that he does not approve of this and indicates that she must graduate from school and sit tight. The man makes sure to tell her that she does not have free will to do as she pleases and he is the only one who can decide what her future would be. Although Teiko expresses her desire to pursue a career as a beautician, her aspirations are disregarded. Her father then leaves home without specifying his return. The poor girl is living in such a disgustingly controlled and depressing home. No wonder she desires to exercise her non-existing self-will on others. On the other side, we see two of the boy bullies out in the woods, spending time together. They are doing shooting practice, one with a gun and the other with a crossbow. As they aim at the crows, they talk about how living in this small village is so boring. There are no places for entertainment and nothing to do when one gets bored. However, the fat bully disgustingly says that the other day was the only time when his heart raced, referring to when they set fire to Nizaki's house. Night falls and we see one of the girl bullies named Takabana getting scolded by his drunk father at home. It is almost dark outside, but his father insists that he go out to buy something for him, When she tries pleading, he goes as far as throwing something to hit her so that she may leave the house. On the other side, we see Rumi at her house, sketching Teiko's portraits. She has drawn the girl beautifully in her sketchbook. It is so beautiful that one might think the girl almost likes her bully. The next day, there is a sudden surprise as Nozaki returns to school. Everyone eyes her weirdly as they did not expect her to come back to school so soon after what happened with her family. Later that day, as she is spacing out in a corridor, Abo approaches. He advises her not to push herself too hard to come to school. Nozaki tries replying, but her voice fails her. Turns out the poor girl has cried so much that now she can't even speak. Inside the classroom, when Nozaki asks the two girls about something, they both quickly leave. Takabana, along with the two girls and Nozaki, head towards the spot where Nozaki was previously bullied. Once there, Takabana asks where Rumi is, and the two crying girls reply that she ran away. The girl then attacks Nozaki with a pin, causing her to fall into the pit despite the two girls trying to intervene. She also ruthlessly confesses to setting the fire in Nozaki's house. As Takabana tries to harm Nozaki with a knife, Nozaki fights back. She grabs a nearby nail and plunges it into her bully's eyes. Then she beats her to oblivion with a stick. Meanwhile, the other two girls attempt to escape and apologize, but Nozaki doesn't forgive them and takes action. She takes Takabana's knife and comes at them. Before one of the girls passes away, she reveals that Kyugo was the mastermind behind the fire plan. The subsequent day at school, the absence of the three girls raises concern among Kyugo and his companion. They wonder where the girls might be. All of a sudden, they hear some police sirens and freak out, especially upon noticing the presence of police officers outside the school premises. Aba comes over and asks Kyugo why he is freaking out. The boy tries to hide his anxiety, and in a state of panic, says that he is going home since it has become too cold. On his way back home, Kyugo comes across Nozaki and once again attempts to intimidate her. However, Nozaki refuses to succumb to his bullying tactics and retaliates when he pushes her. She then attacks him with the same knife that she used the other day. One after another, she inflicts several injuries over the boy. After suffering several injuries, Kyugo tries to flee. He stumbles and crawls away from Nozaki and falls down a slope. Nozaki looks down at him as he is writhing and groaning in pain. He tries saying that it wasn't just him, but the cut on his cheek makes him cry out. After watching him suffer for a while, Nozaki leaves him unattended in the freezing weather. The next day, due to heavy snowfall, the school is closed and Nozaki sleeps in. That day, Aba visits her, but she doesn't come out of bed. As Aba talks to her grandpa, he reveals his intention of taking Nozaki and her sister back to Tokyo following her graduation. He entrusts Aba with the responsibility of looking after and safeguarding her until then, and he agrees. Meanwhile, at Rumi's place, she has a happy time with her mother and expresses her wish of sleeping together with her. Her mother smiles and tells her to go grab her quilt. As she enters her room, she gets a distressing call from the two boy bullies who tell her that, except Teiko, all the girls along with Kuga are missing. The boy tells her that he is suspicious of Nozaki and believes that it is all her doing. He mentions that since she has taken them out, now it would be Rumi, the mastermind's turn. He tells her that tomorrow he would take action against the girl and she should remain alert if she wants to survive. After issuing this warning, he swiftly cuts the call. The following day, Nozaki ventures alone through the woods and pauses to admire the liverleaf flowers, only to be ambushed by two boys who underestimate her. The boy named Mamiya shoots using his crossbow but misses. Then they approach the umbrella and find out that Nozaki has fled. Thus, they decide to split up to track her down. Aikawa is the first one to find her. He confronts the poor girl and sickeningly professes his strong affection. After pointing his gun at her, he attempts to kiss, but she resists and dodges his advances. He then gets angry and tries to forcefully, but Nozaki defends herself by attacking him with pliers. Meanwhile, Mamiya also stumbles upon them and tries to shoot Nozaki with an arrow, but accidentally hits Aikawa, fatally wounding him. As he targets Nozaki, she retaliates and eliminates him too. Both the boys pass away after suffering excruciating pain, and simultaneously, the parents of the missing students visit Minami and express concerns regarding their whereabouts. Minami looks rather happy to see how the situation is unfolding. That night, as Nozaki comes back home with blood all over her clothes, her grandfather gets shocked. He asks what happened at first, but then seeing Nozaki's expression, lets it go and ushers her in so that she may change her clothes and clean up. The next day, Aba visits Nozaki, and they take a stroll to the same spot where Aba previously mentioned witnessing the city's beauty under a blanket of snow. They share their first kiss, and Aba pledges to protect her. Teiko is back in her house and playing the CD that Rumi took from Nozaki. That night, while visiting her sister in the hospital, Nozaki's grandpa tells her how they will go to Tokyo after her graduation. The girl listens to her grandpa but expresses her desire to stay here. Back at his home, Aba confides in his grandmother about his desire to pursue further studies in Tokyo. He tells her that he wishes to live with Nozaki, knowing she has no one else to rely on. The scene then shifts to Rumi near the pit where Nozaki was bullied, and she descends into the pit, discovering the lifeless bodies of the three girls. This situation leaves her frightened. When she tries to contact Teiko to inform her, she receives no response. The next day, Rumi locks herself in her room. When her mother calls her in for breakfast, she refuses. The scene shifts to an earlier time, back when Rumi was being bullied in class. The flashback reveals Rumi's intent to take Nozaki's life. Upon being taunted by the bullies, she shouts how she can just and set her house on fire to make it look like an accident. Back to the present, Rumi's non-stop calls finally get attended. Teiko snaps at her to stop calling, but she starts crying. She tells her how she found out the other girls' bodies and how she and Teiko are going to be targeted by Nozaki next. Teiko says she has not done anything to the girl to become a target, but Rumi refutes. She says that Teiko let the girl be bullied because she took Eba away from her. Teiko, however, gets annoyed. She says that she would never like a boy like Eba. A new thought enters Rumi's head and she wonders if it is Nozaki that Teiko likes. Before she can put forth the words, Teiko angrily cuts the call. Rumi's heart sinks and she claws at the drawings of Teiko that she kept by her side. The scene shifts back to the past and we see Rumi carrying a container of kerosene towards Nozaki's house. All the other bullies support Rumi and decide to go with her except Teiko, who decides to head back home. Back to the present, we see Teiko, who decides to visit Nozaki's house to return the CD. She arrives at the place and calls, but turns out that it is empty. On her way back, she encounters Nozaki in a bus, coming back home. She stops to meet her, returning the music CD that Rumi had provided her. They sit down on a nearby bench and talk about how it has been a while since they sat down together like this. The scene then shifts to the past and we see their former close friendship, revealing that they were best friends until Nozaki grew closer to Eba, causing strain in their relationship. Turns out that Teiko loved Nozaki and couldn't see her with Eba. As Teiko prepares to leave, she hears Nozaki call after her to hold her head high and live on. This makes her tear up and she rushes back to fall on her knees and apologize to Nozaki for her past actions. On her way home, Teiko is suddenly attacked by Rumi with a knife. Rumi manages to injure Teiko's legs, finding pleasure in her screams. As Rumi attempts to take Teiko out, the latter retaliates and kicks her down. The scuffles continues and Rumi badly injures Teiko. They come at each other and Teiko barely manages to cut Rumi's face while the latter plunges the knife into her chest. Before fleeing, Rumi confesses that she liked Teiko, but now she is just a useless dirty rug to her and nothing else. It turns out that all the things that Rumi did were in order to impress and get Teiko's attention. The latter understood her advances and is disgusted by her. Rumi leaves and Teiko is left alone, writhing in agony and regretting all her past deeds. Later that night, Eba calls Nozaki, expressing his intention to join her in Tokyo, proposing they live together. Nozaki declines, choosing to stay here. Strangely enough, we can see blood on Eba's hand. After hearing her refusal, he gets angry and slams the phone. As he looks back, there is a strange picture on the wall that depicts flames. Eba then returns to confront his severely injured grandmother, whom he harmed to be with Nozaki. Shockingly, it's revealed he also took out his own father because he used to hit her mother. He then proceeded to eliminate his mother too because according to him, she wanted to be hit, and since there was no one to hit her, so there is no need to live. This boy is a pure psychopath. He then goes to wash the blood off his hands and leaves his grandmother to perish on the floor. Meanwhile, at Rumi's house, we see a frightened Rumi. When her mother inquires about the situation, she reacts anxiously, urging her mother not to be overly kind to her. The next day, the parents of the missing students assemble at the school seeking information about their children. Miss Minami appears, facing insults from the parents. Turns out Minami was also bullied back in her school days, and thus she was scared of even her own students. Overwhelmed by the accumulated of being bullied daily, Minami vents her anger at the parents who couldn't teach their children well. The torrent of anger ends and results in her vomiting once more. Subsequently, she runs out and collapses on the road just before a snow shredding machine. There, she tragically meets her end with a smile on her face. The teacher was so sick of her life that even such a tragic end gave her peace. Back at the hospital, Rumi attempts to set Shauko on fire, but Nozaki intervenes just in time, confronting Rumi. Before she could harm her sister again, Nozaki attacks her. As she is about to choke her to oblivion, Rumi mentions how she can do such a thing in front of her sister. Nozaki falters and Rumi, taking her chances, flees. Meanwhile, Eba approaches her in the hospital. While they are speaking, a nurse rushes to inform Nozaki about her severely injured grandfather. Feeling suspicious of Eba, she rushes outside after him and inspects his hands. Surely enough, there is blood on them, confirming her suspicions. Eba admits to injuring his own grandmother the previous night. He shamelessly tells her how he did it for both of their sakes. Just then, Rumi appears too, and explains how she and others set fire to Nozaki's house, resulting in her mother being burned. Rumi disturbingly expresses her fondness for the smell of the fire. When Nozaki's father arrived to assist, another individual shot him in the leg. Rumi then proceeded to douse him and her little sister Shauko in kerosene. This sick psycho laughs while telling her this story. After hearing all this, Nozaki's blood boils and she goes in to attack Rumi but is attacked. Eba intervenes, assaulting Rumi and inadvertently throwing his bag toward Nozaki. Within the bag, Nozaki discovers a photograph of her father and sister taken by Eba before rescuing her sister. This village is filled with psychopaths. Enraged by the picture, Nozaki reacts and Eba justifies taking it out of curiosity. Nozaki removes the knife from her stomach and endeavors to retaliate against Eba, prompting Eba to grow furious and start punching her in the face. He shouts at her to understand him because in his sick and twisted way, he loves her. He then gets up to grab his camera to photograph Nozaki's face. Just then, he notices blooming liverleaf flowers and rushes to capture their images. He compares the flowers to Nozaki, saying that they are blooming just like her. He then insists that she better promise to stay with him, or else he would just abandon her to the cold to perish. In the meantime, Nozaki gets her hand on the crossbow of Mamiya lying nearby. Abel lifts up the camera to take one last picture of Nozaki. She picks up the bow and shoots through the camera, piercing Eba's eyes and ending his life. Following his demise, she sets off towards her home, grievously wounded. However, she falls down before she can get out of the cold, haunting woods. She curls up, taking her last breath with the necklace that Shouko gave her clutched in her hands, just like a pitiful crimson flower upon the pristine, untainted snow. The movie ends with the final scene where Teiko receives her graduation certificate. Turns out she was saved after all. She then arrives at their classroom, reminiscing about her past with Nozaki.